Hello and welcome to the next part where we're going to look at some of the more localized settings here to make sure that we have some good values that are properly working for any time of day that we're going to choose for this going forward. So one of the things that I would like to do is I would like to add some new levels here. And we actually do have a bunch of things already in here. So we will reuse some of these. And first of all, what we need to do is we need to move all the stuff that we have right now into the correct layer or level here, because I want to turn some of these off. So let's see how we go with this. I will not change the post-process volume for now, but what I will do is I will take the fogs here. So let's double click this so it's highlighted. Now we see it's highlighted. And then we can select these. Actually, we can also rename them. So let's do this atmospheric fog sunny, exponential fog sunny. And we select these, and then we right click and say move selected actors to level. So now they're in here. Then we go with the skylight. We're gonna call this sunny. It's selected. We're gonna move it here. Is that already in here? Yeah, okay, cool. So this one is already in here. Perfect. And then we have our directional light. And we can see here that this is in a different level. So we just move it over here. I'm going to save this. All right. Now the last thing that we need is our editor sphere here. Let's just call it Sky Dome Sunny. And let's move that one in here too. Not really sure why this is taking so long now. There we go. Okay, perfect. So now when I click the little eye icon, I'm going to move this off screen, we get this. And it may seem a bit counterintuitive, but this is actually perfect. So, because here's the thing. An interior like this, it is not lit to like look great when there's a lot of light from the outside coming in. An interior like this, it's usually lit in a way so it works to look nice and cozy during darker times, because that's what we use lights for. Also, like there's there's just way less influence from like exterior lighting in many cases, and so this is kind of like done in a way so it looks nice and cozy and welcoming, right? So what we will do is we will hide all the exterior lighting so we can actually work with the proper influences here. So, but one thing that we need to sort of do is we need to also figure out what are the type of lights that we actually have in here. And exposure for something like this is usually very different than what we have outside. So this is our outside exposure. I'm just going to set this to 5 quickly. So now we can see like, yep, there's lots of light coming in now from the exterior. But we also just want to see, okay, so what do we have to work with here? So we do have these ceiling lamps here. We do have these lamps here. And these ones are interesting because the ceiling lamps, we will most likely end up using spotlights for these because they just like face in one direction. These ones are a little bit more interesting because they have this glow orb thingy sort of like, so they will like emit light in almost all the directions. So we need to see how we do these. And this is pretty much all the light sources that I can see. What is this? Okay, it's a vent cover. All right, great. So this is basically all the stuff that we have. And here's one thing that everybody should know about me. I really like to do practical lighting. So that means that I really like to light my scenes based on the actual light sources that are in the scene. So I'm not a big fan of like fill lights or fake lights or movie lights, whatever you want to call them. They can be necessary, but what I really like is, for example, when you look at movies that are practically lit, what they do is like if they have something that needs to be lit properly, they actually just really put a real light source there so it works. They don't do like a fake light that suggests that something is readable while it's actually not. So usually what I like to do is I like to start by just using all the light sources that are there and utilize them properly. And when I see it doesn't do the job, I think about, well, can I put new light sources somewhere so it makes sense? Or like how would I like to do this, right? So let's start by doing just that. So usually lights that we have inside have certain brightnesses that are common, let's say that. And you can see these when you go to like websites of lamp manufacturers. Just looking here. 1 second. So, for example, let's say you have Philips light bulbs, right? So you can actually go here and you can see, okay, I want to choose by cab, I want to choose by shape. What do I want, right? So let's go simple first. Like let's say, okay, just looking for a normal bulb here. So now this is all the stuff that you can just buy at the store, right? And most lamps that we have inside, they're also what we call warm white. So this is a rather bright one here. So let's just go and like look at this. Now, this does not really tell us much. So what we need to do is we need to see all the specifications. And here we can see a lot of things that are quite good for us, right? So we can see that the color temperature is 2700 Kelvin. and that the light intensity is 1055 lumens. That is a very standard light bulb. So a lot of the light bulbs are between 800 and let's say 2400-ish lumens, while like 2400 is actually really on the bright side. Like most light bulbs are around like this or 1500. And this is what you have in your living room. So a lot of the light bulbs that are used for stuff like this here is a bit more, let's say, moody. Like they're not as bright. Usually it can be different as well. So this is sort of like the ballpark that we will end up with, right? So the first thing that we can do is we can just start here. And for now, we're gonna use spotlights. We're not really use anything else for now. We'll switch this to movable. And then down here in the advanced section, we go down here and we switch this to lumens. And then what we also gonna do is we're gonna hit this use temperature. And here, I don't remember if I already said it, but I probably did. I would always use temperature when we work with like normal light sources. Like there's other stuff like lights that like, you know, like the sodium yada yada lights thingies, and like lights that have like specific colors and wavelengths. We don't use temperature for those. Like we can for the warm ones, but there's like cold ones that almost go towards some greenish stuff. So it is better to just Google and pick the RGB values for those. But for like normal light sources, they're pretty much always on the temperature spectrum. So we will keep the color here at white, and instead we will use the temperature, and I'm just gonna set 2700 Kelvin now. So that's just what we do. And this is gonna be this is a rather warm color, right? So now for our intensity, let's just go with the value like this. And I'm just gonna put it somewhere close to this thing here. And again, like I'm not trying to make this like super accurate or beautiful. What we're doing right now is we're actually more interested in like value balancing, okay? So we're gonna do this here. And now we can see that we like don't really see a lot of this, which is also kind of expected since this is like still like daytime, and even though we just adjusted our exposure, it's not gonna make the light like super visible because that's just not how it works. So I'm gonna turn this off, and I just realized that I put this in the same layer because I had this one turned on. So it placed it automatically in that layer. I'm gonna switch here and say move selected actor to level. So now we're good. And now when I turn this off, we have this. All right. And now what I wanna do is I wanna go into our exposure. And now we need to make this look proper. And there's a bunch of ways to do so. So for now, I'm gonna rename this here and call it post-process volume sunny. And I will put this back to 1. And then I'm gonna go down here. And this is all good. Now I'm gonna add another post-process volume right here. And for now, I will just call this post-process volume interior. I will make this unbound now, but we will change that later. This is just really like for now. And then I'm gonna do priority. I'm just gonna do 5. It could be 1, doesn't really matter. And now when I go in here, I should be able to overwrite this, which I am right now. So now comes in like a lot of knowledge of stuff that I like already have or did in the past. So now we can see now I'm choosing an EV of 3. EV of 3 to 5 is more what you would have for an interior like this. And now you can see something really interesting happening because, like, first of all, yep, you do see this one here. At the same time, you see a lot from this. And this is purely emissive lighting that happens from the sign here. And this may actually end up causing us some problems because this one here will have an emissive as well. And here's a problem with Lumen. You can't really say that emissive does not contribute to the lighting. So as soon as you use emissive surfaces, you'll always end up getting like emissive lighting. And then if you want to use so we call the placed light here, we call these analytical lights, you kind of end up getting twice the lighting to a certain degree. But still, you'll get obviously more accurate shadow casting and more accurate specula from using an analytical light versus doing emissive. But it is still kind of cool that we have this, because if I turn this off, you can see like there is some like nice indirect shadow casting from this. So this is still pretty cool here. But we can also see it's like way too bright. So before we continue with our local light here, we may as well go into our sign here. And I don't know, I'm just doing something like do this like 200. So like I just lowered the intensity from 5,000 to 200. Something more like this. And we can already see that it is doing a lot better job here. But let's ignore this for now and let's look at this. So now the question is, okay, so we have this at 1055 lumen. So do we want this to be the look? Like, do we want this to look this bright or hot? I'm not entirely sure if I want that. So what we can do is we can just raise this a bit more and maybe do this. Because what we need to understand is we will distribute this anyways, so there will be a lot more. But again, it's still kind of hard to tell. So how do we fix this properly? And here's something that I like doing is, first of all, I just like to get a rough ballpark, which I did just now. And then we have this BP here, which is actually great, because what we can do is we can just go into the blueprint which is over here. And we can take our light here and just copy it into this thing here. And in the viewport, we now have this beauty, which is actually quite interesting that it rotates it this way. So let's just see, this should be, okay, minus 90. So we just put this in here, and the one that I have selected here, we delete it. Oh, actually, haha, this is funny. Okay, no, so the blueprint is actually rotated. So we're gonna go with 90 again. This is the right way. So now we have this. And if we go into our lighting only, we can see that we're getting some GI from this. It's not too bad. It's also interesting that this one seems to be a different one. And honestly, I just wonder why. I don't know. So here's a sad thing. In Unreal 4, you could right click and then select, and then you could select the same type. This context menu seems to be gone, which is very unfortunate because it's a really cool feature. Let's have a look here quickly if there's actually shortcuts for this. Control Shift A, that might be the one. It is, that's a bit unfortunate. Okay, let's try this. Control Shift A. There we go. So this is the other one. And so what we can do is we can take this guy here and browse it. So we have it here. And then we click these ones, do this, and then we should be able to replace selected actors with this one. Boom. All right. So I recommend this highly to just use Blueprint light sources because it just is so much easier to get everything set up in a quick way rather than go in here and spam all the lights manually. Also very important is that all this is like slightly off the grid. So like if you would just like to move these like along this line, it is not necessarily working right out of the box the way it should. So that is just something to keep in mind. So now we can see a bunch of things here. So first of all, we get some really harsh shadows, and that is because we don't have any source radius set on our light. And we also get like this kind of thing here, which is not really what is happening. Like it's basically like our angle is too narrow. We don't really want that. So we're gonna go in here, and first of all, I'm just gonna drag this down a little bit more like this. And it's a bit hard to see here. So we're gonna increase our angle a bit. Maybe to something like this. Maybe we pull this one down so we actually have it here as well. All right. And then what we can do is we can change our source radius here a bit, because here's the thing, like if we look at this, of course there's one light bulb in here, but the actual light source is going to be this illuminated piece of glass. This is sort of like what starts distributing the light. So the light is not like really being emitted from the center here, but it's like emitted from out here, right? So it's a bit more like an area light. And what we can do is we can like tweak our source radius until we start seeing. It is lagging a bit here. I'm not exactly sure why. So now we can see this is our source radius, right? And we don't want our source radius to look like this. We want it to sort of reflect this shape. So let's do maybe 15, 12, and 12 seems kind of like good enough. And now what has happened, you can see here, we're actually getting like more soft shadows. And this is because of the virtual shadow map that is doing this. So this looks a bit more realistic than, I'm going to reset it back to 0. Like this looks bad, right? So 12, definitely not the same fidelity as ray traced shadows, but still so much better. So now we have this. And when we look here, there's already a lot happening here. And we're also getting this issue. And that is because of the way that our light source is like colliding here with the thing. And this is pretty cool here because we're actually having a subsurface material from what I can tell. So it means that when we have a light source behind it, it actually starts making it glow. And here we also get our nice star-like shape. So let's have a look on our material. Okay, no, it's not subsurface. So this is basically just a bug from the source radius clipping through the object, as it seems. That is something that can happen. So what we can do is we can just take the light and we can like move it out the thing like this. All right. And then we can obviously go into our emissive material here. And we can change this a bit. So this is a bit like sad, so to speak, because here we can't really choose like the color temperature the same way. So we don't really know the exact value for our 2700 Kelvin, although there's online converters. So that's also like a thing that you can do. And now we kind of like just want to up this. And we can see it starts glowing here, but it doesn't really glow here. And that is because of the value not being HDR enough, most likely. So I'm just going to try something intense here. And it is not doing it. Beautiful. Oh, it's that one. Great. It was just derived from another instance So this is what happens when you're not focused. So I put this in. And one thing that is also really important to understand is sometimes these like the light source itself can feel incredibly bright, but the actual lighting from it is not. Like, so what I mean by that is if you take a picture with your camera of a light bulb in your living room, and let's say it's a free hanging light bulb, the light bulb will always be super bright on your photo, while the actual environment lighting from the bulb may not be as bright. That is something that is important to understand, because like these things, they just glow so much. That is something very natural, that they blow out this much while the light itself is not as extreme. So now what I would like to do is, I actually feel like this is a bit too much light here. So again, we can say we stick with this and we're gonna use this exposure. We can also say like we change the exposure so to something more like this. And this actually does feel quite good to me. However, what I would also say is probably this would be better. And the light itself is probably not 1055 lumen. I think that for a light source like this, especially if they have so many, they would probably go with a lower lumen value. I'm gonna try something like 800, 600. It kind of feels like it would be better to have it a bit more moody. And there's a lot of different light bulbs that do like a lot less lighting, especially in stuff like this where you kind of want it to be more on the moody side of things. We're getting quite a bunch of interesting issues here. So, and looking at this, we should tone down the emissive also a little bit. So probably something like this feels quite good to me. And now looking at this guy here again, we should definitely have a look at these colors and the brightness values. And it's always really good to also look at reference while doing this, to kind of like choose your battles here with these colors. So we got this. I just want to change this here. Make this like really nice red. So something like this feels kind of good to me. And I think here we were on something more like this. All right, this is not too bad. Now this one's going to be a bit tricky. So just going to choose a point light here. And we need to see how that's going to mess up, because this is always a bit tricky when you do these kind of things, to make sure that it kind of like works. But now we need to see. I'm going to use the temperature again, 2700 here. This is kind of okay. Switch this here to lumens as well. And now we can see that even like 400 lumens is quite bright. And here's an interesting thing. So like point lights always look brighter than spotlights, even though with the same settings. So that is just something to be aware of. That's a thing. We also want to change this to something like this. And now we're starting to get problems here. So we may be able to fix these problems by making these emissive again. So let's see about that. And we want to really do like some moody lighting here. I'm just going to see how much we're getting here. I'm not trying to make this super accurate. This is just like a sort of like exploration here. So this is like the first step of starting to do this, just like figuring out a bit of things. And then of course we should also add this to the blueprints instead, which will help a lot. So I'm just like pasting this onto the scene root. There we go. And then we move it down. Like so. So now we just need to do the same thing again here, where we select these, Control Shift A. Oh, or not. Let's just select these. And replace them with this one. And now, like, that we have this, there's a few things that we can now think about. So first we can think about how we do the distribution, but there's also more where we can say like, okay, do we want these ones to be exactly the same? Do we want to change the colors around a bit? So there's a bunch of like really interesting things to figure out now. So let's stop with this here for now. And then we come back in the next session and we're going to make this look a bit more interesting. We're going to place this out a bit more where it makes sense. And then we're going to just figure out something that is nice and that we really like. So thank you so much for watching and see you in the next session.